Okay, good morning everyone. My name's Sam Metcalf. I'm the Midlands editor at thebusinessdesk.com and welcome to this latest Invest Midlands session called Placemaking with a Purpose, the future of our towns and cities. More than ever before, I think our sense of place has been challenged and the future of our towns and cities as places of work, rest and play have come under increasing scrutiny. It's clear that the COVID-19 will change the way we live and work well beyond the end of the pandemic. Today, Lloyds Banking Group have convened a panel of representatives from government, business and academia to discuss how this will impact our city and town centres across the Midlands and what needs to be done to help them recover and thrive. Before we start the discussion, I'm going to hand over to Amanda Dorel of Lloyds Banking Group to say a few words and introduce our panel.
Thank you, Sam, and a warm welcome to everybody this morning. And as Sam says, we Lloyds Banking Group are absolutely delighted to be sponsoring this Invest in Midlands event that's going on along the whole day. But just before I introduce our fantastic panel, just a few words from me. So as Sam says, my name is Amanda Dorel. I'm the Lloyds Banking Group Regional Director here in the Midlands and South Wales, and I look after the SME and the mid-corporate business. And a huge thanks to our panel, who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves shortly. But just before I do, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking a little bit about why this particular event was one that I wanted to get involved in. So the Lloyds Banking Group was founded over 250 years ago in this great region itself, the Midlands, and we have a strong connection here supporting businesses and people across all the communities. We know that lockdown has been extremely challenging for our businesses, and on the high streets in particular, we have seen challenges, and it is encouraging that as the restrictions lift, we are beginning to see signs of people returning. The pandemic will change many things, and we know a number of businesses are looking at very much new ways of working. We still don't know what the new normal will look like. However, one thing is clear: towns and cities across the Midlands will play a huge role in our recovery from COVID-19. We know that talking to clients across the whole region, that a number of them are feeling optimistic, and it's really encouraging to see in the latest business barometer survey that we took in April that we are beginning to be confident high in the East Midlands, and in the West Midlands at its highest point since January 2019. It's not going to be plain sailing, and many businesses still face challenges. And that's why I really wanted to convene this great panel of guests today to help us consider how do we respond to some of those challenges and how do we take advantage of some of the opportunities that lie out there. So before I hand back to who's going to kindly chair today's conversation, I just want to come out to each of the panel guests individually, just to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves to you and what their role will be in this discussion. So Jo, can I start with you, please?
Yes, thank you, Amanda. So I'm Jo Gideon. I'm the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent Central, and I'm also a Parliamentary Private Secretary in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I'm really interested in the role of levelling up and how our cities and towns in the West Midlands are going to benefit from greater investment, not just post-pandemic, but I think really the effect of, we'll come on to discuss it, the effect of the pandemic has been seismic, but also changes that were already occurring and looking at opportunities.
Thank you, Jo. Kathrin, can I come to you?
Thanks, Amanda, and hi everyone. I'm Kathrin Enenkel. I'm a senior analyst at the Centre for Cities, and we are a think tank which is looking at the UK's biggest cities and largest towns, like 63 across the UK, and look, okay, what actually is general their economic situation, how can we improve it? And for sure, the crisis led us to a lot of research. We are tracking the recovery on the labour market, the high streets, which is probably giving me also like good background information for the discussion today.
Thank you, Kathrin. Phil, can I?
Thank you, Amanda. We're a private development and management company specialising in the redevelopment of residential, commercial and industrial sites across the Midlands, Staffordshire and actually up into the northwest. So we are just repurposing trying to find hidden value in all sorts of sites, converting them to mixed use or anything that we can then redevelop and put into our portfolio. Or increasingly now, we're getting a lot of interest, which I think is great for the Midlands, in completed developments from Asia, Hong Kong investors in particular. So perhaps that's a point to discuss later, but it just shows there's just such great interest and a massive vote of confidence in our region. We love doing what we do, and it's just great to find an old building that we can bring back to life, and that's what we do.
Thank you, Phil. Nicola, can I come to you?
Lovely, thank you, Amanda. My name is Nicola Fleet-Milne, and I'm the chair of the Colmore Business Improvement District, which is situated in the Central Business District in Birmingham. We have a particular interest in this topic because 92% of our levy payers are professional services, the other 8% are leisure and hospitality. And actually, the two go hand in glove in terms of creating vibrancy and the life of the city. So we have recently commissioned a future business districts research piece in conjunction with the University of Birmingham, their City Ready team. And we are awaiting the results of this, but this is exactly what we're looking into is kind of the future of the business district.
Thank you, Nicola. And finally, Mark, for you to introduce yourself.
I think we're still waiting for Mark to join, Amanda.
Okay.
So we'll kick on with this.
Yeah.
We'll kick on with the discussion, and Mark will hopefully join us. A question for you all, really, to kick off. I'll come to you first, Kathrin, if I may. Do you think the pandemic will change the way that people want to work in the future? Will we see differing work patterns in different sized businesses? And if so, how do we adapt buildings to make the so-called new normal work?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Very interesting, particularly, and I think we need to think about this first when we look at how many people can actually respond to the new work patterns, because you may have seen the statistics from the Office of National Statistics, which is basically saying that during the pandemic, only 25%, so 1/4 of the people in the UK could work from home. The number is different in different parts of the country, very high in the southeast, not so high in the Midlands. So it's actually a large part of people which cannot work from home. And for these people, all these work patterns will just be applied in a secondary way. But I mean, for sure, for the people who can work from home, office workers, etc., we expect that there will be a change in work patterns. Probably people will come to the office not 5 days a week, but maybe 2 to 3 days. And this will for sure have impacts on where they live. So probably the commuter belts around big cities will be bigger, and also how the office space is used, because maybe people just come to the office now for interactive activities, whereas they do like working where they need to focus at home. So I think this will have all impact and on how office space is used and how it may be renovated or worked on.
Thanks. Mark, you managed to join us. If you just want to introduce yourself very briefly.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Stapleton. I'm a director at the Property and Construction Consultancy Turner & Townsend. We employ about 350 staff across Birmingham and Nottingham region, supporting clients in the real estate, infrastructure and national resources sector. We work on some of the region's most iconic projects, and our business is now operating back at pre-pandemic levels. And we really do see the city and town centre vitality key to attracting and retaining our talent to help our business grow. So it's a really important topic for our business.
Mark, we were just talking about how the pandemic has altered differing working patterns. What's happened with your office? How has that changed already?
I think it's fair to say that as a business, our staff have been very agile and have been able to, with the technology that exists, to cope really well with the fact that the offices were closed for quite some time. They have now started to reopen. but I'm in the office today and there's probably 10 to 15 members of the team here, where pre-pandemic, on a Friday in particular, we would have over 120 members of the business in the office. So it's gradually coming back. I think once we go through the sort of, hopefully on the 21st of June, when Boris gives us the sort of back to normal, we do expect to see more staff come back to the office.
Thanks, Mark. Joe, can you give us an exclusive there? Are we going to see everything come back on June the 21st? And this must have really altered how you operate.
Yes, it really has. I mean, I wish I knew on June the 21st. I think watch this space is what I'd say. But it has altered the way government's operated, but also it's created these new opportunities. I mean, I was delighted with the announcement last week that we're going to get over 650 jobs to Stoke-on-Trent from the Home Office. And, so reevaluating where even government departments can operate effectively has been a key part of, both levelling up. And I think the pandemic has created opportunities across and will create across the West Midlands. I know Wolverhampton and Birmingham, and I think probably Coventry are getting more jobs from government. So, really there are massive opportunities for realigning workforce across the country. And I think that, in places such as Stoke-on-Trent, it also shows a kind of a recognition that you can work effectively anywhere, and actually the quality of life in the West Midlands is probably better than living in central London. So I think that's created a really good new opportunity.
Phil, how are you? You're a developer. How are you looking at Are you looking at buildings differently now, and what you're going to do with them? What are you doing to adapt?
We are considering that there's certainly a change in what a lot of our tenants are looking for, where we have trade counter occupiers, people like that, and some retailers. I think it's all made them all become far more interested in technology for a start, and certainly with ourselves, we in our own office have been trying to become paperless and do more online, and it's really pushed that forward with the introduction of, I think, like, obviously we'd never used Teams or anything, and now I speak to more people on Teams than I perhaps do on the phone, to be honest. It's half the day. Our accounts is all done now remotely. Our accountant comes into the office once a month, but with tenants, what we're seeing is that where possible, they're getting as many people to work from home, and they are speaking to us existing tenants about perhaps changing the space that they have. Some people want more space, some want theirs rearranged, and so we're in discussion with lots, but there are definitely lots of changes, and I think everyone has, people haven't sort of hidden away from and just buried their head. Everyone just seems so determined now to make things work, and they're just glad that we've got the go ahead to start lifting things and to really push forward with the business. Everyone just seems so ambitious, which I think is great.
Thanks, Phil. That's nice and positive. Nicola, how's the bid reacted to what's happened over the last year?
Well, we've spent quite a lot of time asking people both the businesses, what they want in terms of people returning to work, but also on a more perhaps anecdotal level, asking the workers what they want, how they want to return to work. And in some cases, the two marry up quite nicely in some firms, and in other firms, they really don't. So I think it was interesting that you said the way that people want to work. I think for the bid, one of the biggest things that we can do is make sure that the life doesn't leave the city centre, because actually part of wanting to come back to a physical office is not just, it is in a large part about your colleagues, but it's not just about your colleagues, and it's not just about your desk. It's about where you go at lunchtime or where you go after work, and how if you're going to end up working 3 days a week, which days do you pick and why? I mean, we had a little conversation off air earlier about people wanting to come in on Thursdays and Fridays, because by the time you get to the end of the week, there's a bit more sociability built into the week. So I think it will, you know, for us as a bid, that's the important thing for us to do. There's lots of cafe culture, obviously, coming through. We need to get the safe side of it. And I do think there is a piece about how people get to work as well. I'm sure we'll come on to that, but this sort of the transport piece into the city will also be very important.
There was lots of noise, of course, made about that high streets being in decline, Nicola, before all this happened. Do you think, conversely, in some ways, that this what's happened over the last 12, 15 months can act as a catalyst for change for the high streets and sort of spur on their revival? Absolutely. I mean, you know, there are winners and losers in every life-changing event. And, you know, sadly, there are some venues and there are some businesses that have had to close their doors in the last year. But in their place springs forth new ideas and new innovations and new brands. And actually, we're seeing quite an increase in new businesses coming into the city centre. And actually, they want to be where other people are. They want to be around that vibrancy. And like I said, the cafe culture piece, I think, is going to go more than we even realise now, really hand in glove with that high street experience. Thanks, Nicola. Mark, you mentioned earlier in our chat about, you know, different bigger firms changing, moving away from sort of Monday to Friday working. If we do that, and as Nicola said, people wanting to come in later in the week, what do we do with the large city centre offices? How do we best make use of that space?
I think following on Nicola's point, no, change is inevitable, change is good, change is progressive, and what I think as a society we need to do is we need to encourage property owners and give them support to create flexible working environments that respond to their tenants and therefore our staff needs. So, you know, we have seen in other parts of our business in the country over the last few weeks, staff coming back to at the latter end of the week because of the social side of things. So we need to be able to provide that framework for our talent, because as an employer, we need to listen to our staff and provide a framework that allows them to develop to help our respective businesses grow. So I think flexibility, from, as Phil said, from a property owner, flexibility from employers, and then flexibility from the local authority is really key to keep our cities and our town centres relevant and vibrant and support all the talent that comes out of our local universities. Because we can't afford to lose that talent to other parts of the country that are one step ahead of us.
Sam, you're on mute.
Sorry, Kathrin, there's a good point from Paul Wheatley there in the chat over on the right-hand side. He's asking how we stop towns and cities becoming donuts with little in the middle. How do we stop that, Kathrin?
Yeah, good point. So I think first we must think that, I mean, the whole discussion now sounds like all offices would be closed in the center and people are all working elsewhere. I think this will definitely not be the case. So we have seen from the Centre for Cities that in the past, prior to the crisis, actually a lot of businesses were moving to city center locations because these locations are giving benefits other places do not give. And this will hold on in future. Maybe they will reduce the office space, but still work, they need to commute somewhere. And this will not be in the suburbs, it will be in the city centers. So I think, rather optimistic that this will hold on. So if there is more office space because maybe some offices are reduced, etc., I think it's rather positive, because it would mean theoretically that the rents for these offices are falling, and maybe other businesses which normally had not the chance to be in city center locations can actually go there and be innovative. So I think a lot of efforts must be on making the office space attractive, keeping it attractive, and maybe make offers to businesses like startups, etc., which have different needs to be there. So I think I'm rather optimistic and think if the focus is on office space and attracting office workers, the high street will the city centres and the high streets will actually have a chance to live on.
Thanks, Kathrin. Joe, is this kind of thing something that can happen in your constituency in Stoke?
Absolutely, and it's already happening. I mean, so 97% of all building in Stoke-on-Trent is on brownfield site, and we are looking at the kind of urban living solutions to, you know, we all recognise that the high street's struggling and that retail space is, you know, there's too much of it, and equally, you know, corporate offices may not be as required in their old format in town and city centres. But, you know, if you convert or repurpose some of these buildings into urban living, then you have a whole new vibrancy to city centres and town centres, you know, and certainly that then feeds into the kind of the leisure activities, the kind of, you know, the nighttime economy, as well as cafe culture, which I think is the way forward.
Well, you're a developer and an investor in property. Is it as easy as that, really? How are you going about, you know, looking at buildings?
Every developer will tell you that planning is the real problem. We do think that's getting a little bit easier. We think that planners, certainly on schemes that we've put forward lately, have been dealt with far more quickly. They seem to be working towards trying to encourage developments to happen, whereas certainly a couple of years ago, they were just a major obstacle to be in the way, really. So I'm really, all of our, we are 100% full occupied on all of our retail. We have still receiving inquiries from, I mean, it is quite niche. Well, I think for any retailer to survive now, they've got to be a niche operator. So they've basically got to be doing something, unless they're very, very good and a real brand, they've got to be doing something that you can't buy on Amazon. So we're very conscious of that, but we're really, I mean, we're constantly looking. We will buy retail, we'll buy industrial, well, we buy anything, but retail and industrial, we're very, very keen on, and or even, you know, mixed use schemes. We've done lots of those. We've bought a huge amount of pubs that we've converted. We will be seeing a lot more sites like that, but they have such development potential. We're confident that they firstly will create jobs and will be occupied by people that are going to service the real need that there is in the community.
Phil, one sector that's suffered badly, of course, is hospitality. With people staying local, is this, Nicola, do you think, a chance for towns to rise up, really, or suburbs, really, and sort of take the lead and show cities how it should be done?
Yeah, very likely. I mean, a lot of people obviously stayed local to where they lived in the suburbs during the pandemic, and even with the relaxation of some of the rules, the ability to kind of spill out of venues and use more of the streets or the pavement areas, I think attracted a lot of people. And I think for those local high streets, that this is absolutely their chance to grab that opportunity and hold on to it for all they're worth, because this is their chance to rebirth themselves. But the city will catch up, because as people do come back into the offices, and you know, obviously there are a lot of residents in the city centre anyway, but the cafe culture there has really sort of come to the fore. We're now going to be pushing that. I actually go on a meeting with all the other bids in the city centre. We're all very clear that we want cafe culture to stay, that we don't want this to be flash in the pan. We don't want in 18 months for the rules and everyone has to pack away the outdoor stuff. We want to be given that permanency to attract people back into the city centre, to give them things to do, and to give people who already live there, you know, a better sort of, you know, venue life. But those venues can't they can't really invest until they're told this will become a permanent scenario. Fortune on their outdoor if they think they've got to pack it away within the next 12 to 18 months. So I hope that both the city and all of those suburban high streets actually really take this opportunity and they all thrive, that people have more choices. I don't want it to be the city or nothing. I want to be able to choose from all those suburban high streets myself and go out to those areas as alternatives, cultures, new areas. So I think the cafe culture has a large part to play in how that revival comes about.
Nicola, Joe, how can government help engender that revival for hospitality?
Well, I absolutely agree with Nicola that the short-term measures to do with outdoor extensions and things need to be made permanent, because that will enormously help. I mean, I think government, has already helped massively through all the various business support schemes to make sure that people would still be there after all these lockdowns. I think going forward, there's this Help to Grow scheme. I think particularly in terms of digital, because what I learned from local businesses I talk to is that many of the smaller hospitality businesses hadn't thought to use digital, and one in particular who made what I call designer coffee set up a takeaway, not a takeaway, a delivery scheme, which, I mean, I must confess that the idea of delivering coffee, it didn't seem to me viable. That they said it was going so well that even after they reopened, that they had 4 delivery drivers for their super coffee. And so I've been really heartened by the innovation that we've seen businesses have introduced in order to try and survive during the pandemic. But those new business practices will continue afterwards. So I do think we will come back stronger, and more businesses that haven't engaged with that need to be given the opportunity for kind of upskilling and retraining, and that's certainly what the government's investing in.
Joe, Mark, you mentioned earlier that there's a few people coming back into your office. How important is that hospitality offer for your staff to come into the city centre? Mark, please.
I think it varies. I don't think there's one size fits all. We've got a very diverse workforce across the Midlands region, but it does provide a really important sort of mental health factor that we must have all seen working from home. We have lost the opportunity to see people face to face, and I think the cafe culture that has thrived in certain areas is a really important contributor to people meeting up face to face and having a much better conversation. I've done it over the last 3 or 4 weeks far more regularly, and whilst you can have a conversation over Teams, it is not the same. And I do see as we move through the summer that being a real contributor to us getting back into our cities and our town centres to help stimulate those individual economies.
Thanks, Mark. Amanda, can I just ask you if that's important to your staff to be in the city centre all the time, or are your staff happy to stay working remotely?
So we've constantly checked in with our staff in terms of how they're feeling, and similar to some of the comments coming from the panel, our colleagues are telling us that them for reasons of work to work from home in a post-pandemic world, but very much on a flexible basis. About the opportunity then to come into offices, come into the central hub network. The other points that are made about using some of the hospitality businesses locally to meet is really important. So we open our offices up over the summer. Clearly all the branch network has been open throughout the pandemic, with the branch staff supporting customers that are most vulnerable. But for the bigger offices, we are starting to open those up from the 24th. And we'll start to invite colleagues in a safe environment back into the businesses to do that very important networking piece, which I think has already come out in the discussion important for colleagues' well-being and mental health. So I think flexibility on the colleagues' terms, but we'll see some of our being used in the same way as they have been previously across the cities and the towns and the.
An interesting question from Malcolm. He says, do the problems being discussed here have anything in common with the problems faced for years by rural communities? Kathrin, would you like to come in on that one?
I think I didn't understand the question. Could you repeat it, please?
So do the problems being faced by city centre or town centre businesses, do they have anything in common, do you think, with the problems that rural businesses have traditionally suffered from?
Rural businesses?
Rural businesses in the countryside outside of town.
Oh, okay. I don't, so I mean, during the crisis, certainly because the office workers were not there anymore and couldn't provide the demand for the high streets. But I think also when we look at high streets and their recovery and in the city centre, we must really differentiate. We have a differentiated look across places. So I think the high streets which are suffering the most currently are actually the ones which did pretty well prior to the crisis, whereas like the ones which when doing not so well with high vacancy rates are actually recovering faster. But I agree with the other people on the panel that definitely for some city centres it will mean that there must be a way far away from retail and rather to experiences as the coffee culture people would not get in their would not get online, etc. So I think apart from getting people back to the center, etc., there must be a focus on coffee culture or other events in the center.
Thanks, Kathrin. Nicola, you've got an MP here. What do you want to see being done to encourage businesses and startups in city centres and town centres?
Oh goodness, how long have we got? I feel like I'm really banging on about the cafe culture. I definitely want to see some permanency around that. I want to give reassurance to those businesses, because once those have reassurance, then a lot of the actual like professional services businesses then have some reassurance of life. The other piece that I think would be absolutely amazing would be, and we've already referred to the tech today, the broadband. I'm not kidding you, Birmingham city centre is dreadful, dreadful. And a lot of very small businesses have had to pay for lease lines into so that they could get fibre to the premises so that they've got the right speed. So I already know businesses around the city centre who have who cannot afford that, and it now means with all of the activity on Zoom and Teams, they actually can't have everybody in the office operating that way because it kills their connection. And so they're now being forced, whilst it's all on Zoom, they're being forced to actually operate from home, or actually cafes with better connectivity. So I mean, that just seems crazy, doesn't it, in this day and age? So I would love anything that we can do. And, you know, we're very happy to work with government, local government to get this stuff in. But we really need that connectivity to be super fast for all businesses to get easy access to, because that will be one of the things that stifles their growth.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, no, so I agree entirely on connectivity. That's why in Stoke-on-Trent we have a full fibre network, and have seriously invested in it. And in fact, tomorrow I'm launching with our local bid the Games Jam. So we're very sort of tech focused and young people and digital and cafe culture, and I think that is the solution. However, I mean, if I can just come back to how we need to repurpose. So we've just lost, or we're about to lose, Marks and Spencer's in the centre of the city, and for a lot of people, that represents the sort of death of the high street. I agree entirely with, I think it was Philip who said, we have to have retail offers in high streets that are things that you can't automatically get on Amazon. So local specialities. I mean, I would love to see more kind of farmers markets and things that really are kind of I would say sort of feely touchy things, you know, products that you don't, just like Zoom isn't the same as meeting a person face to face, products that you actually need to see and have a connection to who you are and where you live. And I think that may be, you know, the future way to go. Thanks,
Joe. Phil, in your game, I guess sustainability is key, has become ever more key. Is there an opportunity to make the Midlands more sustainable, do you think, through these changes?
Most definitely there is, and that's something we try and incorporate into any of our developments. One thing, if I could just mention to Joe, that we would desperately love to see, and we get asked about all the time, that the government were really probably a little bit too generous in the early days with what they did with solar panels, solar PV and solar thermal, in that they offered a feed-in tariff that was extremely generous, too generous really, which then got drastically reduced and eventually stopped. And that seems really, from a developer's point of view, it's a simple thing that we can fit that is an instant reward for the tenants and whatever. But it's almost as if now the government is working against us with measures like that. Yet that had such huge potential. We installed about 20 systems when the system was running, and now we had there was a thriving solar industry across the UK, which pretty much died overnight. Lots of developers would love to see that come back. We're constantly up against achieving improving energy performance certificates. Things like that are a great help. So that's things like that are a big issue for us. But I think every developer now, Sam, is mindful of what measures we can put. We've tried all sorts of rainwater harvesting, but solar is just so easy, and we've really missed a trick there. And that's something I would desperately, and I've mentioned that to my own MP as well, but that things like that would just make life so much easier. And particularly now with everyone's going on about having an electric vehicle, and that's going to be pushed more and more forward. Yet the infrastructure we've got, as I'm sure Mark is aware, I'm no expert on that, but if you speak to someone from Western Power, they're actually tearing their hair out that too many people buy electric vehicles, because we frequently get so close to capacity. I mean, I'm by no means an expert on it. I'm sure Mark probably knows more than that. But yes, I mean, sustainability, to go back to your question, is important, and it's a topic that's on everyone's lips now.
Do you want to come in on some of Phil's points there?
Well, we've only got 8 minutes left, and I think it's a huge topic, and it's really pertinent to responding to occupiers and individuals' sort of conscience, really, about the sustainability agenda. If we are really serious about carbon neutral, then there has to be a really clear plan as to how any city or any town centre can support electric vehicles, because sooner or later the price points of these vehicles are going to be comparable to petrol or diesel. People are going to be buying them, and people travelling into the city centre are going to have very few spaces to charge those vehicles. Not a great advert of the second city. We want to promote our talent, promote our industry, and I'm not close enough to understand the sort of council's view, Birmingham City Council's view on electric charging, but it's been a topic that's been around for a long time and really does need to be addressed.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Kathrin, if I could just come to you very quickly. How do you see the future of transport around cities post-pandemic? What will...
So I think it's very difficult to say this at this point, because we don't know at what days the workers will actually go back to the office. So I think that's a big question a lot of public transport systems have to deal with, because what could happen that a lot of people find it actually very appealing to go in the office Tuesday to Thursday, and that would mean peak times, the transport, particularly in big cities like Birmingham, is like super crowded. So I don't know this, but I think definitely public transport could be used to get people back to the office. For instance, giving reductions to come not at peak times or at certain days, to just coordinate it. And also there, it could be actually a benefit for the city centre, particularly in cities where it was very hard to get into if there would be actually a coordination between different types of workers, so that the public transport system is not operating above its capacities, but makes safer and nicer journeys for all of us.
Thanks, Kathrin. As Mark mentioned, we are running out of time. I'm sure we could sit here all day and debate this topic, because it's huge. We are pushed for time. I'd like to thank all the panel. Before we go, I want to pass over back to Amanda to just sum up what we've been talking about.
Goodness. As Sam said, I'm sure what a conversation over the last 45. Extremely useful, but some positives across the Midlands region. You know, about the opportunity for some of our retail, and you know, we've heard about the fact that offers are more flexible than in the past. Preference, but they will be an opportunity for people to come back in and then use the obviously industries. We've heard about living solutions and this cafe culture, and hold on to all of that, which is a good hold on to that in the future. We've heard about the about some big employment coming outside London, and how do we grasp that across the Midlands. And we've heard very much about the need to grasp these opportunities. We increase this digital journey that we're all on. How do we get super fast digital technology into this great region to help us increasingly more digital? Again, which is supported their businesses. And we've also heard from the panel around how do we build a sustainable transport ecosystem for the future, again to encourage people to use sustainable transport to come in town centres. So a really, really useful discussion. My thanks go to all of our panel, Joe, Nicola, for joining me, and the Lloyds Banking Group. Thank you to Sam for chairing this. And I hope that everybody that's had the chance to listen in and watching has enjoyed the really informative discussion as I have the afternoon. And thank you for Lloyds Banking Group today.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you very much.